Hello again, my DIY loving friends, and welcome to Medicated Housewife DIY, where crafting and mental health come together. Get ready to deck the halls with another Dollar Tree DIY. Join me, your favorite medicated housewife. Okay, maybe I'm your only medicated housewife, as we create stunning Christmas trees that look high-end but are actually super budget-friendly thanks to Dollar Tree. Remember, crafting is not just about making beautiful things, it's also a great stress reliever. So what are you waiting for? Let's go DIY together. For this DIY, I'm using this 9-inch foam cone, and I will link it for you in the description box below, but you can find foam cones of similar size at Dollar Tree. I'm also using this DAP Dry Deck Spackle, which I will link below, but you can easily use the Dollar Tree Spackle for this too. This one is what I had on hand. Now this particular spackle goes on pink and turns white as it dries, so if you use the Dollar Tree spackle, it will be white from the beginning, so keep that in mind. I'm also using gloves to spread the spackle all over the foam cone, and just a note here, it is easier to spread spackle without gloves, but I'm gonna be honest, I had to make dinner after this, and I just didn't want to have to scrub all that spackle off my hands, so I'm attempting to spread this stuff with gloves. It can be done, it's just a little bit more challenging. I'm just being transparent. I want to cover the whole cone, but I don't need a really thick coat, just all over coverage. I grabbed this Dollar Tree silicone craft spatula, and I'm going to be using the rounded back of the spatula to make little rounded indentations throughout the entire cone, just pressing little dome-shaped indents in a random kind of all-over pattern. I wipe the spatula clean with a paper towel in between and just go from the top of the cone, working my way toward the bottom, trying to smooth out each indentation as I go toward the end. I use the rounded back of this marker that I have to make some smaller dome-shaped indents in some spots that I might have missed. And then I'm going to allow this spackle to fully dry overnight. And just a note, I stuck a dowel through the top of the cone just to make it easier to hold on to, and I'll be removing that later. Once the cone had dried, it turned white, and yes, in fact, it does look like the surface of the moon. I can see that too. I'm using some Decor metallic paint in the color rose gold, and I paint the entire cone over all that spackle with the rose gold paint. Although at about the halfway point, I decided I was really not crazy about this color, and I did want it a more metallic looking color. So when this first coat of paint dried, I take it outside and I used some Rust-Oleum metallic rose gold spray paint to paint, and I will link that for you in the description box below. I painted right over the deco art with the Rust-Oleum metallic, and I was overall much happier with the spray paint color. I had also spray painted a wood star that I had in my stash that I had hot glued to a toothpick, and I was pleased with this new metallic copper tone, but I wanted to give the cone an aged kind of tarnished look. First, I used some folk art antique wax, which I will link for you below, but I realized that I needed more of a black kind of a tone for this, so I ended up grabbing this black chalkboard paint from Dollar Tree, and again using a dry brush, I lightly distressed the cone with the black chalkboard paint, giving it a bit of an aged and tarnished look. I also aged that star a little bit too, so that it would match with the cone. And this is my aged hammered copper Christmas tree. And it happens to go perfectly with these plastic reindeer I got at Walmart recently. I just love the industrial metal kind of look this tree has. It's metallic, but not at all glam. If anything, it's a rustic kind of industrial look, and I love the upscale appeal that it has. Plus, it's super easy to do. This next DIY starts with this small cardboard cone I got on Amazon, and I'll link it for you below, but you could easily make a cone out of Posterboard from Dollar Tree to use for this too. Now I needed something to be a tree trunk to fit inside the cone. I had this round wood dowel, and I also had this square thick wood dowel in my stash, which I liked better. I will link it for you below. It was already painted from a previous project, and I used some hot glue to position it into place inside the top of the cone to be my tree trunk. I grabbed a bunch of these bamboo skewers from Dollar Tree, and using my super clippers, which I will link for you below. I love these things. They literally cut anything. I bought them originally to cut pine cones, and now I just use them for everything. I'm going to cut a bunch of the skewers into random sizes, some longer, some shorter, some super short, because I want them all to be different lengths. I really just cut like a handful. I did not count. Using hot glue, I attached the first 4 skewers to my cone, dividing the cone into quarters. I made those 4 the same length, extending down the cone, if that makes sense. So I could use that length as my guide, just ensuring that no other skewers that I add will go lower than my first 4 skewers. I know that sounds a little complicated, but it's really not. Just watch what I'm doing. So I begin filling in the 4 sections on my cone with more skewers of varying lengths, but none of them are going to extend lower than those first 4. I do, however, make lots of the other skewers a shorter length than the original 4. Hopefully that makes sense to you. So first I filled in all the spaces on the lower part of the cone before then addressing the middle and the upper parts of the cone. I used some shorter pieces to fill in all of those spaces, and finally, toward the end, I cut some really tiny pieces of skewer to fill in the leftover spots in between the upper and lower skewers until all of that cardboard on the cone is gone. I can't see it. All I can see are the skewers covering the cone. I grabbed this large wood cube from Dollar Tree, and using a mixture of antique wax and water to thin it out, I paint the wood cube with the wax all over to make it a nice rich brown, and we're going to use it as a base for the tree. The square wood dowels that we are using for a tree trunk inside the cone was already painted with the watered down wax from a previous project. Then I began painting all the bamboo skewers on the cone with that same wax and water mixture until they are all a nice golden warm brown. I did end up doing 2 to 3 coats of the diluted wax, I believe, to achieve the color that I wanted on those skewers. Then I had to address the top of the cone, which was kind of a choppy mess of assorted size skewers. So I decided my best bet was to cover the top of the cone. I'm using some jute twine from Dollar Tree. I started at about 1 inch down from the top of the cone, and I begin wrapping the jute around the cone, securing it in place with hot glue every so often until I reach the very top of the cone. I had this pack of wood acorns from Dollar Tree, and I decided they would make as good a tree topper as anything. So I painted the acorn with the antique wax and hot glued it to the top of the tree over my jute twine. Then I hot glued the tree trunk to the wood cube base, and off camera wrapped 1 piece of jute around the base to hide that hot glue. And this is my bamboo Christmas tree, and I love the natural and neutral wood feel of this tree. I also think it doesn't have to be limited to a Christmas tree. I think this is an all seasons, high-end looking piece of wood decor to accent your home any time of the year. Just gorgeous. For this next DIY, I'm using this very large cone I got on Amazon. I'll link it below, but you can definitely use a smaller cone from Dollar Tree and just have a smaller tree. I'm also using 2 different kinds of coffee filters, the white basket kind of filter, as well as the unbleached light brown basket filters, and I'm honestly not sure if you can get these at Dollar Tree, but you can easily get them both at any supermarket. Starting with the white filters, the amount that you'll need depends on the size of your cone. So for my large cone, I end up using about 30 or so of these white filters. I'm going to fold each filter by pushing the center of the bottom inward and then kind of squeezing the walls together to make one side relatively flat and the other more poofy like a flower. And you will see me fold a ton of these. Just know that once you get the hang of it, it's really easy, and you can also pause the video and replay it as many times as you need. I had used a pencil to lightly draw a garland swirled and kind of draped around the cone. And using some hot glue, I am going to attach the flat end of each of my white filters along that drawn line to form a swirl of white coffee filters in the shape of garland going up the cone. I'm starting at the bottom and I am working my way up to the top of the foam cone. With my white garland done, I then grab a handful of my brown coffee filters and we are folding them the exact same way as the white filters. We push the bottom of the filter up and squeeze the walls around it, forming a flat side and a fluffy kind of flower looking side. Again, it depends on the size of your cone as to how many of these filters you will need to fold, but for my large cone, I ended up folding about 80 or so of the filters. No joke. It's a good thing it's so easy to do because you will be folding many of these. Then, starting at the bottom of the cone, we're using more hot glue to attach the flat side of our brown filters to the foam cone. And I start at the bottom and going in a straight line around the cone, I fill in the cone with the brown coffee filters, and basically we're just filling in the bare areas around the white filters when we run into one of them. And hopefully that makes sense to you. This does take a really long time to do because it's a lot of area to cover. This one is a big foam cone. So it's going to take a long time to cover. And I also use a lot of folded filters. A lot of those are needed, but it is simple and you can totally do this while binge watching something because that's what I did. It's methodical for sure, but it's very, very relaxing. And off camera, I took a scissors and trimmed the heck out of this thing, like trimming a hedge outside because it's super puffy and I wanted it to be more triangular Christmas tree shape. So I did in fact trim a ton off this tree. But even so, it is giving me parade float vibes. I know. Either that or like a super huge pageant dress, right? It's so hard to unsee. I think this has potential, but it needs to be different. Maybe it needs even more trimming. I don't know, you guys. I just don't know. And as always, I want to know what you think. Let me know in the comments which one of these budget-friendly and high-end Christmas trees was your favorite and why. I love hearing from all of you. And if you've enjoyed this DIY video, there's another one waiting for you. Just click the link on your screen for more Medicated Housewife DIYs. Also, I'd love for you to join our little crafting family and subscribe. Thanks for watching, and until next time, my name is Sarah. I'm the Medicated Housewife, and crafting is my medication.